The little girl appeared in the emergency room at 2:17 a.m., wearing one pink shoe, a blood-spattered pajama dress, and the kind of silence that made every nurse in Street Mercy Hospital stop breathing. Rain hammered against the glass doors behind her. Police sirens screamed somewhere down the block, blue and red lights sliding across the polished floor like warning signs. She could not have been more than 6 years old. Her dark curls were soaked flat against her cheeks. One hand clutched a torn, stuffed rabbit. The other was wrapped around a silver locket so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Nora Vale saw her first. She had been tying off gauze around a drunk college kid's split eyebrow when the automatic doors shuddered open and the child stepped inside as if the storm had carried her there. No parent, no paramedic, no officer. Just a trembling little girl standing in the glow of fluorescent lights with rainwater dripping off her chin. For one awful second, nobody moved. Then Nora crossed the ER faster than anyone else. "Hey," she said softly, crouching in front of the child, keeping her hands visible, her voice warm. "You're safe. My name is Nora. I'm a nurse. Can you tell me your name?" The girl stared past her. Not at the waiting room. Not at the security guard. At the street outside. As if something was coming. Nora followed her gaze through the rain-streaked glass doors. The ambulance bay was half dark, lit by flickering emergency bulbs and the wash of lightning over downtown New Orleans. A black sedan sat crooked across the curb outside. Its driver's door hung open. Smoke curled from the hood. Nora's stomach tightened. The child whispered, "Don't let them take me." Every sound in the ER seemed to vanish. Nora lowered her voice. "Who, sweetheart?" The girl's eyes finally met hers. And Nora saw it then, not just fear but recognition. Like the child had been told to find someone. Like she had been running toward Nora before she even knew Nora existed. The girl opened her tiny fist. Inside was a folded scrap of paper, wet and shaking. Nora took it carefully. 3 words were written in black ink. "Find the princess." Before Nora could understand what it meant, the lights above the ambulance bay exploded. Glass burst inward. The child screamed. Nora grabbed her and twisted, shielding her with her own body as the ER doors blew open, under the force of 2 men crashing through them. They wore dark raincoats, no hospital badges, no police uniforms, and their faces were hidden beneath black masks. Security reached for his radio. One of the men lifted a suppressed pistol. Nora did not think. She moved. She shoved the child behind the triage desk, slammed her palm down on the emergency lockdown button, and screamed, "Everybody down!" The first shot shattered the wall clock. The second hit the security guard in the shoulder and spun him backward into a row of chairs. Panic detonated. Patients screamed. A gurney crashed against the nurse's station. Someone yelled for police. The overhead system crackled as metal shutters began dropping over the outer entrances. Nora dragged the child beneath the desk with her, pressing one hand over the girl's mouth not to silence her cruelty, but to keep her breathing quiet. The masked men moved like they knew exactly where to go. Not random attackers. Not thieves. Hunters. One of them shouted, "The girl! Find the girl!" The child went rigid beneath Nora's arm. Nora held her tighter. Her own heart was slamming so violently she could feel it in her throat. She had worked in emergency medicine for 8 years. She had held pressure over stab wounds, cut clothes off overdose victims, and stood between screaming families and dying men. She had learned to keep her hands steady when everyone else fell apart. But nothing in her life had prepared her for masked men storming her ER for a little girl carrying a note that said, "Find the princess." The lockdown shutters were still descending, too slowly. One of the attackers vaulted the triage counter. Nora grabbed the first thing her hand touched, a metal trauma shears, and drove it into his thigh. He roared. She surged upward, shoved him off balance, and pulled the girl toward the medication corridor. "Run," Nora whispered. They ran. Behind them, the man cursed. Footsteps pounded. A shot punched into the wall beside Nora's head, showering white dust across her hair. The little girl stumbled. Nora scooped her into her arms and kept moving. "Hold on to me," she gasped. The child wrapped both arms around her neck. Nora pushed through the swinging doors into Trauma Hall B. Red emergency lights pulsed overhead. Rain thundered on the windows. Somewhere behind them, metal shutters slammed shut with a sound like a vault closing. For 3 seconds, Nora thought they might survive. Then, the far elevator opened. A third masked man stepped out. He raised his gun. Nora stopped so hard her shoes skidded on the wet floor. There was nowhere to go. The supply closet was behind her. The trauma bays were exposed. The attacker behind them was already rounding the corner. The little girl buried her face in Nora's neck. "Don't let go," she whispered. Nora backed up, putting herself between the child and the gun. "I won't." The masked man took one step closer. Then the hospital's main power cut out. Darkness swallowed everything. A breath later, headlights flooded the corridor through the glass wall at the end of the ambulance bay. Bright, white, brutal. Engines growled outside. Not police cruisers. SUVs. Black luxury SUVs, one after another, sliding through rain like predators. The masked man turned toward the light. The ER doors shook. Then a voice came from the darkness behind him. Low, calm, male. "Take one more step toward them, and your mother will need dental records to identify you." The masked man froze. Nora did too. The emergency lights flickered back on, and Damian Russo walked into Street Mercy Hospital as if the lockdown existed only because he allowed it to. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and drenched in rain, wearing a black suit under a long charcoal coat that moved around him like smoke. His dark hair was slicked back from a face too handsome to be kind and too controlled to be safe. A healing cut marked one cheekbone. His eyes were a cold, impossible gray, fixed not on the gunman, not on the chaos, but on Nora. Behind him, men in black suits poured into the ER with terrifying silence. No shouting, no panic. Just precision. The masked attacker swung his weapon toward Damian. Damian did not flinch. One of Damian's men struck from the side, disarming him so fast Nora barely saw the movement. Another man appeared behind the attacker, chasing Nora, and slammed him face first into the wall. A third swept the corridor, weapon lowered but ready, eyes scanning every doorway. The hospital had been invaded by monsters. And then something worse had arrived to stop them. Damian Russo stepped over broken glass, his gaze never leaving Nora's face. The little girl lifted her head from Nora's shoulder. "Daddy," she sobbed. Nora's body turned cold. Damian's expression shifted, only for a second. Only enough for Nora to see the icy control crack into something raw and terrified. He crossed the distance between them and reached for the child, but she clung to Nora harder. Damian stopped. His eyes moved to Nora's hand, still protectively braced across the little girl's back. Then to the child's bare foot. Then to the blood on the pajama dress. His jaw tightened. "Who touched her?" he asked. No one answered. The air itself seemed afraid to move. Nora found her voice first. "She needs a doctor. She's hypothermic, possibly in shock, and there may be injuries I haven't." Damian looked at her then. Really looked. The cold fury in his face faltered. His eyes dropped to the silver locket hanging from Nora's neck. It was small, old, half hidden beneath her scrub collar. A locket she had worn since she was 11, since the night a stranger had pulled her from the wreckage of a burning car and vanished before police arrived. She had never known who gave it to her. Never known why there was no photo inside. Only an engraved letter. D. Damian stared at it as if seeing a ghost. Nora tightened her grip on the child. "What?" The little girl sniffled against Nora's neck. "I found her," she whispered. "I found the princess." Damian's face went deathly still. Then, in front of shattered glass, bleeding guards, terrified patients, and an ER full of people who seemed to understand that the world had just tilted, Damian Russo looked at Nora Vale and spoke in a voice so quiet it frightened her more than the guns. "Hello, princess." Nora did not move. She heard the word as if from underwater. Princess. Not sweetheart. Not nurse. Not ma'am. Princess. A name from a note in a child's fist. A name from the mouth of a man everyone in New Orleans suddenly seemed afraid to breathe near. Nora stared at Damian, pulse pounding. "Don't call me that." His eyes darkened, but he did not apologize. Men like him probably did not know how. The little girl trembled again. Nora shifted her focus back to what mattered. "I need a trauma room now." Damian turned his head slightly. "Clear one." His men moved before the words were fully out. Nurses, who had been frozen in terror, suddenly snapped back into motion. "Doctor." Kellerman emerged from behind Trauma 1 with blood on his gloves and disbelief on his face. "Nora," he said, eyeing Damian's men. "What the hell is happening?" "I don't know," she said. "But she's 6, freezing and terrified. Trauma 2. Damian reached for his daughter again. This time, The child loosened one arm from Nora's neck, but did not let go completely. "Lila," Damian said, his voice changing around the name. It was still low, still controlled, but softer. The girl's lower lip shook. "I did what Nana said. I ran to the hospital. I found her." Damian's hand hovered at her wet curls but did not touch until she leaned toward him. Only then did he cup the back of her head with devastating gentleness. "I know," he murmured. "I know, little star." Nora hated the way that tenderness unsettled her. She needed him to be exactly what he looked like: dangerous, criminal, untouchable, not a father whose hand shook for 1 second when his child pressed into him. "Trauma too," Nora repeated. Damian lifted Lila from Nora's arms with care that made the hallway feel suddenly too intimate. The girl whimpered and reached back for Nora's hand. Nora took it immediately. Damian glanced at their joined fingers. Something unreadable passed through his expression. They moved together into the trauma room. Inside, the fluorescent lights had switched to backup power, harsher and colder than usual. Rain lashed the windows. The smell of antiseptic mixed with smoke and wet wool. Lila sat on the exam bed wrapped in warm blankets while Nora checked her pupils, her breathing, the bruising on her arms, the small cut at her hairline. Damian stood near the wall, silent, watching every touch. Not with suspicion, with focus. Like Nora's hands were the only thing keeping him from destroying the city. "You need to wait outside," Nora said. "No." She looked up. That wasn't a request. His men, gathered near the doorway, went dangerously still. Damian's gaze remained on Nora. "She's my daughter, and right now she's my patient." For the first time since he entered, the corner of Damian's mouth almost moved. Almost. A threat dressed as amusement. "You speak to armed men like that often?" "I speak to frightened fathers like that often." Nora leaned closer. "You can stay if you stand there. Keep quiet, and stop terrifying everyone in this room." A faint flicker crossed his eyes. Lila, wrapped in blankets, whispered, "She's bossy." Damian looked at his daughter. "I noticed." Nora checked Lila's pulse again, fast but steady. No signs of internal trauma. The blood on her dress did not appear to be hers. That fact should have comforted Nora. It did not. "Lila," Nora said softly, "can you tell me what happened tonight?" Damian's expression hardened instantly. The little girl looked at him first. "Don't look at him," Nora said gently. "Look at me." Lila swallowed. "We were in the car. Marco was driving. Nana was with me. Then another car hit us. Bad men came. Nana told me to run. She gave me the paper." Nora's throat tightened. "Where is your grandmother now?" Lila's eyes filled with tears. Damian turned away, just slightly. But Nora saw it. The grief had hit him like a blade, and he refused to bleed where anyone could see. A man entered the room then, older than the others, with silver at his temples and rain dripping from his coat. His face was pale. "Boss." Damian did not look at him. "Say it." The man hesitated. Damian's voice lowered. "Say it, Matteo." "Your mother is alive," Matteo said quickly. "Critical. They're bringing her in now." "Lila sobbet." Damian closed his eyes once. Only once. Then opened them, colder than before. "Who?" "We're checking traffic cameras." The hit vehicle had stolen plates. But the men inside the hospital... Matteo glanced toward Nora. Damian's eyes sharpened. "Speak." They were wearing falcon rings. The room temperature seemed to drop. Nora did not know what falcon rings meant, but Damian's men reacted like a death sentence had been spoken. Damian's jaw flexed. Adrian Vale. Nora's hand paused on the thermometer. Vale. Her last name. She looked up. Damian noticed instantly. So did Matteo. "What did you say?" Nora asked. Damian turned slowly toward her. For a moment, the hospital sounds faded again. The monitors, the rain, the distant shouts. "Adrian Vale," he said. "A man who should have died 15 years ago." Nora forced a laugh that had no humor in it. "Vale is not exactly rare." "No," Damian said. "But Nora Vale is." Her blood went cold. "You know my name." "I know more than your name." Nora stepped back from the bed. "Then start explaining." Dr. Kellerman entered before Damian could answer, followed by 2 nurses pushing a crash cart toward the next trauma bay. "Russo, we have your mother coming in through the west entrance. Multiple fractures, severe blood loss. If you want her alive, get your army out of my way." Damian did not hesitate. "Matteo, clear the path. No one enters this hospital without my approval." Dr. Kellerman bristled. This is not your hospital. Damian looked at him. The doctor stopped talking. Nora hated that. Hated how power bent the room around Damian. Hated how every person seemed to understand something she did not. Lila gripped her hand. Don't leave. Nora softened immediately. I'm not going anywhere. Damian watched her say it. And again that strange, haunted look flickered in his face, as if she had unknowingly repeated a promise someone had once made to him. For the next hour, Street Mercy Hospital became a fortress. Police arrived and were stopped by Damian's men at the doors. Hospital administrators whispered into phones. Patients were moved away from the ER. Security footage was locked down. Outside, rain turned the ambulance bay into a river of flashing reflections and black SUV headlights. Damian's mother, Nora Russo, was rushed into surgery with a team of trauma surgeons. Damian never raised his voice, never paced, never broke. He stood outside the operating room like a man carved from grief and violence. Lila refused to leave Nora, so Nora stayed with her. She found dry pediatric scrubs. She cleaned the cut on the girl's forehead. She warmed her small hands. She braided her wet curls because Lila asked in a voice so small it nearly broke something in Nora's chest. Your hands are nice, Lila whispered. My patients usually say they're cold. They feel safe. Nora swallowed. Damian stood near the doorway, hearing everything. He had removed his wet coat. His black dress shirt clung to his shoulders. There was blood on his cuff, not his, Nora thought. His watch looked expensive enough to pay off her student loans, yet he stared at his daughter's little pink shoe on the floor, as if it were the only thing in the world he owned. Did you know my mom? Lila asked suddenly. Damian's face changed. Nora looked between them. Lila kept her eyes on the stuffed rabbit. Nana said if anything ever happened, I had to find the princess because she would know what love looks like even if she didn't remember. Nora's breath caught. Damian's voice cut through the room. Enough, Lila. The girl flinched. Nora turned on him. Don't. His eyes flashed. You don't understand what you're asking her to remember. No, Nora said, standing. I understand that she is traumatized, cold, and clinging to the first adult who didn't bark orders at her. Lower your voice. Mateo, outside the room, looked like he expected lightning to strike her dead. Damian stepped closer. Nora did not back away. He stopped inches from her, towering, controlled, furious. You think bravery means not being afraid, he said quietly. It doesn't. It means knowing exactly what can happen and still choosing to stand there. Good, Nora whispered back. Then you know what I'm doing. For several seconds they stared at each other. The tension between them was wrong. Too intense, too immediate. It should have been fear. And it was. Nora was not foolish. She knew what Damian Russo was. Even if she had never heard his name before tonight, every instinct screamed that he was a man who lived in locked rooms, whispered deals, and graves no one found. But beneath the fear was something more dangerous. Recognition without memory. A pull she could not explain. Damian looked away first. Not because he was weak. Because something in looking at her hurt him. A nurse called for Nora from the hall. We need you in Trauma 1. I'm with a pediatric patient. It's one of the attackers. He's crashing. Damian's head turned. Nora understood immediately. If she left, Damian might follow. If Damian followed, that attacker might not survive long enough to say anything. She pointed at him. You stay here. His mouth tightened. Nora, your daughter needs you more than your revenge does. Silence. Then Lila whispered, Please, Daddy. Damian's eyes lowered to his child. And the feared Damian Russo, the man whose arrival made armed attackers freeze, stayed. Nora entered Trauma 1 to find chaos. The attacker she had stabbed with trauma shears lay on the table, pale and sweating, blood pooling beneath his thigh. His mask had been removed. He was younger than Nora expected, maybe 22, with a falcon ring on his right hand and terror in his eyes. Pressure's dropping, another nurse said. Nora snapped on gloves. Clamp, suction. He hit the femoral branch. Let's move. The young man grabbed her wrist with surprising strength. Don't let him take me, he gasped. Nora froze. Not because of the words. Because they were the same ones Lila had said. Who? Nora asked. His eyes rolled toward the hallway. Vale. A chill moved through her. My name is Vale. He stared at her then, really seeing her. His terror turned into disbelief. No, he whispered. No, you're dead. Nora's pulse spiked. What did you say? You're dead, he rasped. He said the Russo princess burned with her mother. The room narrowed. The monitors beeped faster. Nora leaned close. Who said that? The young man's mouth opened. A shot cracked through the glass window of Trauma 1. The patient jerked once. Blood dotted the sheet beside his head. Nora dropped instinctively as the room erupted in screams. Another shot shattered a cabinet. Sniper, someone yelled. Damian's men stormed the hall. Nurses dragged patients away from windows. Nora stayed low, breath tearing through her chest, staring at the dead attacker on the table. He had been about to tell her something. Something about her. Something about Damian. Something about a princess who supposedly burned with her mother. Damian appeared in the doorway a second later, gun in hand now, all softness gone. His eyes found Nora on the floor. For 1 second, naked fear broke through his face. Then he was beside her, pulling her behind the trauma bed with his own body between her and the shattered window. Are you hit? No. Are you hit? He repeated harsher. No, she snapped. He was talking about me. Damian went still. Nora grabbed his sleeve. He said I was dead. He called me the Russo princess. Damian's face closed. That was answer enough. Nora's anger flared so hot it burned through the fear. What am I to you? Another shot slammed into the wall above them. Damian covered her head with one hand, jaw clenched. Not here. Yes, here. Nora. No. A child walks into my ER with a note telling her to find me. Men shoot up my hospital. Your daughter calls me princess. A dying man says I burned with my mother. You don't get to say not here. Damian looked down at her. Rainwater dripped from his hair. Glass glittered around them. The hospital light strobed over his face, turning him into something both beautiful and damned. You were promised to me, he said. Nora stopped breathing. What? When you were a child, Damian said, each word controlled with visible effort. Our families made a blood alliance. You were Nora Belandi then, the only daughter of Elena Belandi and Salvatore Belandi. Your father was the last honest man in a dishonest world. My father made enemies faster than he made money. Their alliance kept half the city from tearing itself apart. Nora stared at him. No. You wore that locket the night your family's car was attacked. No. I was 14. You were 10. You were trapped in the back seat. I pulled you out before the fire reached the gas tank. Her hand flew to the locket at her throat. The memory hit like lightning. Smoke. Rain. A boy's voice saying, Don't close your eyes, princess. Strong arms dragging her through broken glass. A dark-haired boy pressing something cold into her palm. A locket. Sirens. Fire. Then nothing. Nora shook her head. My parents died in an accident. Damian's face hardened with grief. No, they were murdered. The words landed like a physical blow. Another bullet struck the outer corridor. Damian turned, fired once toward the far window, not wildly, not blindly, but with terrifying precision. The sniper stopped shooting. Nora stared at him in horror. He looked back at her. We need to move. I'm not going anywhere with you. Yes, he said quietly. You are. Because you command it? Because whoever ordered this came for Lila first to draw you out. Now they know you're alive. Nora's throat tightened. Damian leaned closer, voice dropping. And if Adrian Vale finds you before I understand how he survived, he won't leave enough of this city standing for me to bury. Her last name felt suddenly foreign. Vale. A shield. A lie. A dead man's name. Within You heffened. You hefters. You hefteders. You heftedo service. Noman, you heftedo service corridors with Lila tucked against his chest and Nora walking beside them, still in blood-marked scrubs. Doctor, Kellerman argued until Damian said something about hospital donors and a missing inspection file, and suddenly the doctor found other things to do. Nora hated every second of leaving. Her job was to stay. Her instinct was to protect her patients. But when she looked through the glass doors and saw another black sedan idling beneath the rain, headlights off, waiting, she understood that danger had already entered the hospital because of her. Staying would not protect anyone. It would make everyone around her a target. Damian guided them into a private elevator at the end of the surgical wing. Matteo and 2 guards followed. The elevator descended below the basement level, far deeper than Nora knew Street Mercy went. Where are we going? She asked. A private exit. Of course you have a private exit from a hospital. I paid for the pediatric oncology wing, Damian said. I included emergency infrastructure. Nora looked at him sharply. He did not meet her eyes. The elevator doors opened onto a concrete tunnel lit by yellow emergency lamps. A sleek black SUV waited at the far end, engine running. Lila had fallen asleep against Damian's shoulder, exhaustion finally taking her. Her little hand still clutched Nora's sleeve. Damian noticed. "She trusts you," he said. "She's scared. She doesn't trust people when she's scared." Nora swallowed. The tunnel smelled like rain, oil, and old stone. Somewhere above them, the hospital continued its night of blood and secrets. "Who is her mother?" Nora asked. Damian's face tightened. "Dead." "I'm sorry." "No, you're not." Nora blinked. "Excuse me? You think I'm a criminal who brought violence into a hospital and traumatized my own daughter? You don't want to feel sorry for me." Nora looked at Lila sleeping against his chest, then at the man holding her as if she were made of glass. "I don't know what I feel," she admitted. That seemed to disarm him more than anger would have. They entered the SUV. The city outside was drowning. New Orleans at night blurred past in streaks of neon, rain, and shadow. Black SUVs boxed them in front and back. Damian sat across from Nora with Lila asleep between them, her head on Nora's lap now, her feet tucked against her father's thigh. No one spoke for several minutes. Nora watched Damian's reflection in the tinted window. He was younger than his reputation felt, mid-30s maybe. But his eyes looked older than grief. He kept one hand resting lightly near Lila's ankle, as if he needed physical proof she remained alive. Nora touched her locket. "Nora Belandi," she said softly. Damian's gaze lifted. "Was that really my name?" "Yes." "Who changed it?" "My mother." Nora looked up. "Alessandra?" "She found you after the attack," he said. "My father wanted to keep you under Russo protection. But my mother knew that would make you a symbol, a target. So she gave you to a nurse she trusted, Miriam Vale, your adoptive mother." Nora's chest squeezed. Miriam Vale had raised Nora with quiet hands, fierce rules, and a sadness she never explained. She had died 3 years ago, of a stroke, taking all her secrets with her. "She never told me." "She was ordered not to." "By your mother?" Damian's jaw flexed. "By me." The words struck hard. Nora stared at him. "You were 14, old enough to understand that being near me would get you killed. You decided my life for me. I saved it. You erased it." Damian leaned forward slightly. "I watched your mother die. I carried you out of fire. I heard men searching the wreckage for your body because they had orders to cut your throat if the flames didn't finish the job. So yes, princess, I erased your name. I erased your inheritance. I erased every record connecting you to the Belandi bloodline, and I would do it again." The SUV seemed too small suddenly. Nora's anger tangled with something unbearable. Because beneath his arrogance was a boy in the rain, holding a dying child's hand. "You don't get to call me princess," she whispered. His eyes held hers. "I know." But he had called her that anyway. They arrived at the Russo estate just before dawn. It rose behind iron gates on the edge of the garden district, all white stone, black balconies, and old southern elegance shadowed by modern security. Rain dripped from magnolia trees. Armed guards moved through the grounds like ghosts. The mansion glowed warm from within, but nothing about it felt safe. It felt like a beautiful cage. Nora carried sleeping Lila inside because the child would not release her. Damian did not argue. He walked beside them through marble halls lined with oil portraits and fresh flowers, his men falling back at subtle gestures. A housekeeper gasped when she saw Lila, then burst into tears. "She's alive," Damian said gently. The woman crossed herself and kissed Lila's damp hair. Nora was taken to a guest suite larger than her apartment. Cream walls, tall windows, a fireplace already lit. Dry clothes laid out with unsettling efficiency. Soft black pants, a white sweater, socks, even a new pair of sneakers in her size. She turned to Damian at the door. "You knew my size?" His expression did not change. "I had them guess." Lear. A pause. "Yes." The admission landed heavier than the lie. "How long have you been watching me?" Damian's eyes did not waver. "Long enough to know you walk home from night shift with pepper spray in your left pocket and coffee in your right hand. Long enough to know you give half your paycheck to the free clinic on Dauphine Street. Long enough to know you sit in your car for 6 minutes after hard shifts before driving, because you cry where no one can see." Nora's face burned. "That's not protection. That's stalking. It kept you alive. It kept you owned." Something flickered in his eyes, sharp and wounded. "You were never owned by me. Then unlock the gate and let me leave. No. Nora laughed once, bitter and disbelieving. At least you're honest. Damian stepped into the room, but kept distance between them. Lila slept curled on the sofa under a blanket, thumb near her mouth. You can hate me, he said. You can refuse every answer I give you. You can throw every glass in this house at my head. But until I know who betrayed my family and why Adrian Vale is using your dead name to hunt my daughter, you stay behind these walls. My dead name, Nora repeated. She sat on the edge of the bed because her knees suddenly felt weak. Damian's voice softened almost imperceptibly. Nora. Don't. He stopped. For a while, only the rain spoke. Then Nora asked the question she was most afraid of. Why did Lila's grandmother tell her to find me? Damian looked toward his sleeping daughter. Because my mother believed you were the only person I would not sacrifice to win a war. Nora's breath caught. Damian turned back to her, face unreadable. She was wrong, he said, but his voice did not convince either of them. By morning, the Russo estate had become the center of a silent war. Men came and went. Phones rang behind closed doors. Security footage appeared on screens in Damian's office. Nora, unable to sit still, checked Lila twice, then demanded access to Alessandra's surgical updates. Damian allowed it, which surprised her. He seemed to enjoy control too much to surrender information easily. Alessandra survived surgery. Barely. Damian received the news without expression, but his hand tightened around the edge of his desk until his knuckles whitened. Nora saw. He saw her see. Neither mentioned it. Lila woke around noon crying for her grandmother. Nora stayed with her in the sunroom, where rain traced silver lines down tall windows, and the garden beyond looked drowned in green. Damian stood outside the room, listening while pretending not to. Daddy scares people, Lila said, picking at a muffin. Yes, Nora said carefully. He does. He scares bad people more. Nora looked at her. Lila's eyes were too old for 6. My mom used to say Daddy was a locked door, she whispered. But I was the key. Nora's chest ached. What was your mom's name? Sophia. Was she kind? Lila nodded. She sang in Spanish when it rained. Daddy doesn't sing. He just looks sad and quiet. Nora glanced at the doorway. Damian was gone, but she knew he had heard. That afternoon, Nora found him in the estate's private medical room, stripping off his shirt in front of a mirror. She stopped in the doorway. A long cut ran across his ribs, shallow but angry, likely from glass during the hospital attack. Blood had dried beneath the edge of his undershirt. He had been walking around wounded for hours and said nothing. You're bleeding, she said. He turned. I've had worse. Men like you always say that as if infection cares about ego. He almost smiled. Almost. She snapped on gloves from the cabinet. Sit down. I didn't ask for a nurse. No. But your daughter needs her father alive, and apparently you're too emotionally constipated to handle basic wound care. For 1 second, Damian looked startled. Then he zapped. Nora cleaned the wound in silence. His skin was warm beneath her fingers. Too warm, too real. She could feel the controlled rhythm of his breathing every time her hand brushed his ribs. A tattoo covered part of his shoulder, a black crown split by a blade. Scars marked his torso, old and pale. Bullet wounds. Knife wounds. A life written in violence. You're staring, he said. I'm assessing. You're angry. I'm multitasking. This time his mouth did curve. Barely. It changed his face in a way Nora did not appreciate. She pressed antiseptic harder than necessary. He inhaled, but did not pull away. Good, she said. Cruel woman. Careful. I have needles. His eyes lifted to hers. For a breath, the room shifted. The distance between nurse and criminal, hostage and protector, past and present, blurred into something intimate and dangerous. Nora looked away first. Who is Adrian Vale? She asked. The smile vanished. Damian's body went still beneath her hands. He was my father's advisor, he said. Brilliant, charming, treacherous. He orchestrated the Belandi attack and blamed a rival family. My father killed him afterward, or believed he did. And Miriam Vale? His sister. Nora's hand froze. Damian watched the truth strike. My adoptive mother was his sister? Yes. Nora stepped back. No, Miriam raised me. She loved me. I believe that. Do you? Nora demanded. Or is everyone outside your bloodline disposable? Damian stood slowly. Miriam hid you from her own brother for 15 years. Whatever her blood was, her choice was yours. Nora wanted to reject that comfort because it came from him. She could not. Her memories of Miriam were suddenly full of shadows. The locked drawer in her bedroom, the way she panicked whenever black cars idled too long outside, the way she insisted Nora never submit DNA to ancestry sites, the way she cried when Nora graduated nursing school and said, "You became what saved you." Nora swallowed hard. Damian reached toward her, then stopped himself. The restraint hurt more than the touch would have. "You should have told me when she died," Nora said. "I went to the funeral." She looked up sharply. "You were there?" "In the back, behind the oak tree." Nora remembered a black car at the cemetery, a man standing in the rain beneath no umbrella. "That was you." "Yes. Why didn't you come to me?" His eyes moved over her face with unbearable intensity. "Because you looked free." The words knocked the anger out of her for one fragile second. Then Mateo burst in. "Boss, we found the leak." Damian turned, all softness gone. "Who?" Mateo hesitated, eyes flicking to Nora. Damian's voice became lethal. "Who?" "Dr. Simon Kellerman." Nora's stomach dropped. "No," she said immediately. "Kellerman has worked at Street Mercy for 12 years. He's arrogant, but he's not." Mateo held up a tablet. Security footage played. Dr. Kellerman in a dim hospital stairwell, speaking to a man Nora did not recognize. A handoff, an envelope. Then Kellerman placing something beneath the triage desk 2 hours before Lila arrived. A tracker. Nora felt sick. He knew the girl would come, Mateo said, or he knew someone would. Damian took the tablet. His face went empty in the way that made men step back. Nora grabbed his arm. "You are not going to murder my colleague." Damian looked down at her hand on his skin, then at hair. "He sold my daughter's location, and he may know who paid him. If you kill him, that answer dies." "I won't kill him." Nora did not believe him. Damian leaned closer. "Unless he makes me." That's not reassuring. It wasn't meant to be. They found Kellerman 3 hours later trying to leave the city through a private clinic near the river. Nora insisted on going. Damian refused. Nora reminded him that Kellerman would speak more easily to her than to a mafia boss preparing to remove his organs alphabetically. Damian stared at her for a long moment, then said, "You stay behind me." "I'm not one of your men." "No," he said. "You're more likely to get me killed." She should not have liked that. They drove through rain-dark streets as evening fell, the city glowing gold and blue beneath storm clouds. The clinic was closed, its windows dark, its sign flickering. Damian's men surrounded the building while he and Nora entered through the front. Kellerman stood in the lobby with a gun in his shaking hand. He looked older than he had that morning. "Nora," he said, voice breaking, "you shouldn't be here." She stepped forward despite Damian's hand catching her wrist. "Simon, what did you do?" Kellerman's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't know they'd hurt the child." Damian's voice was soft. "You placed a tracker under the desk." "They told me it was for Russo," Kellerman snapped. "They said he would come. They said if I helped, they'd erase my debts." Nora stared at him. "Gambling?" Kellerman laughed miserably. "My wife's cancer treatment. Insurance denied the trial. I borrowed from men I shouldn't have. Then someone came and offered enough money to keep her alive." Compassion struck Nora before she could stop it. Damian felt it. His grip tightened. "Who came?" Damian asked. Kellerman shook his head. "I don't know his real name," Nora said, "but you saw his face." Kellerman looked at her then, and terror swallowed his grief. "He told me if I ever spoke, he'd tell you the truth." Nora went cold. "What truth?" Damian stepped forward. "Careful." Kellerman's laugh turned frantic. "You still haven't told her? God, Russo, all these years, and you still think silence is mercy." Nora pulled free from Damian. "Tell me." Kellerman looked at her with pity. "Your mother didn't die in the car." Damian moved so fast Nora barely saw him. He knocked Kellerman's gun hand aside just as Kellerman fired. The shot went into the ceiling. Damian slammed him against the wall, forearm across his throat. Nora's ears rang. "What did you say?" she whispered. Kellerman gasped. "She survived. Elena Belandi survived the fire." Damian's face was a mask of rage. Nora looked at him. "Is it true?" He did not answer. The floor seemed to tilt beneath her. "Nora," Damian said. She backed away. "Is it true?" His silence destroyed something. Kellerman laughed weakly. He knew. His whole family knew. Damian slammed him harder into the wall. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Then tell her about Raven House." Nora felt the name like a key turning in a lock. Raven House. She had dreamed of it. A white room, a woman singing, a window with bars, the smell of lavender and smoke. Damian's face changed. And Nora knew. She turned and ran. Not far. She made it into the rain outside before Damian caught her. He grabbed her arm, but she wrenched away. Don't touch me. Rain poured over them. Headlights lit the alley behind the clinic. His men stood at a distance, tense and uncertain, witnessing what none of them could protect him from. You told me my parents were murdered. Your father was. My mother? Damian's jaw clenched. She was taken. For 15 years? Yes. And you knew? I found out 2 years ago. Nora stared at him, rain dripping down her face like tears she refused to shed. 2 years. I tried to get her out. You didn't tell me. If I told you, you would have gone looking. She's my mother. She was bait, Damian shouted. The sound cracked through the alley. For the first time, Nora saw him lose control. Not much. Just enough. His chest rose and fell. His eyes burned. Adrian wanted you alive enough to come for her, and unprotected enough to take. Every message about Elena was designed for that. Every lead, every rumor, every ghost sighting. I spent 2 years burning through his networks trying to find where he kept her without putting you in his hands. Nora's voice broke. You should have let me choose. Damian stepped closer, rain running off his jaw. I know. The admission was quiet. Devastating. I know, he repeated, and I would still rather have you hate me alive than forgive me dead. Nora shook her head. That is not love. That is control. His face went still. I never said it was love. No, you just built a cage and called it protection. She turned away. This time he let her go. But before she reached the SUV, a phone rang in Damian's coat. Matteo answered, listened, then went pale. Boss. Damian looked over. Matteo's voice dropped. The estate is under attack. Nora's body turned to ice. Lila, she whispered. Damian was already moving. The drive back became a nightmare of speed and rain. Damian sat forward, one hand braced against the seat, speaking into 3 phones with lethal calm. Nora sat beside him, soaked and shaking, all anger temporarily swallowed by fear for the little girl who trusted her. Explosions flashed in the distance before they reached the estate. Orange light behind magnolia trees. Smoke rising into the storm. Damian's face turned to stone. The front gates had been rammed open. One SUV burned near the driveway. Guards moved through smoke. Gunfire cracked from the east wing. Nora jumped out before the vehicle fully stopped. Damian caught her around the waist and pulled her behind the SUV as shots snapped against stone. Are you insane? He snarled. Lila is inside. And you think dying in the driveway helps her? Nora shoved him. Then move. Something almost like pride flashed in his eyes. They entered through a side passage beneath the kitchen. The house was chaos, alarms shrieking, smoke drifting under chandeliers, shattered glass glittering across marble floors. Damian's men fought room to room against attackers wearing falcon rings. Nora stayed low, following Damian toward the family wing. At the top of the stairs, the housekeeper lay bleeding from her arm. Nora dropped beside her instantly. Damian turned. Nora, she'll bleed out. My daughter. Go, Nora shouted. I'll catch up. He looked torn for half a second. Then he pointed at Matteo. Stay with her. No, Nora said. Go with him. Matteo hesitated. Damian said, Nora, I can handle bleeding. You handle monsters. Their eyes met through smoke. Then Damian ran. Nora tore fabric from a curtain and tied a tourniquet around the housekeeper's arm. The woman sobbed, clutching Nora's wrist. They took Miss Lila to the chapel, she cried. Old chapel, under the house. Nora's heart slammed. She looked down the hall where Damian had vanished. Then, at the staircase behind her. She knew hospitals. She knew fear. She knew what it meant to move towards screaming when every instinct demanded escape. So she ran toward the chapel. The old chapel beneath the Russo estate was hidden behind a wine cellar door and down a spiral stair slick with dust. Nora heard voices before she reached the bottom. One was Lila crying. Another was a man's voice, smooth and amused. Your father will come, little star. Men like Damian Russo always come when you cut the right nerve. Nora pressed herself against the stone wall. The chapel below was small, candlelit, ancient. A cracked statue of the Virgin stood behind an altar. Lila sat on the floor near it, wrists tied loosely, tears streaking her face. Beside her stood a tall man in a gray suit, silver-haired and elegant, wearing a black ring shaped like a falcon. Damian Vale. Nora knew him before anyone said his name, not by memory, by the way her body recoiled. He turned slightly, as if sensing her. "Come out, Nora." Her blood froze. Lila's eyes widened. "Nora, run." Adrian smiled. "You always did have blondie eyes." Nora stepped into the chapel because there was nowhere else to go. Let her go. "How very like your mother." "Where is she?" Adrian's smile sharpened. "Alive. For now." Nora's hands trembled, but her voice stayed steady. "You attacked a child to get to me. I returned a lost piece to the board. She's 6. And you were 10 when Damian pulled you from that car. Children are always involved in dynasties. Adults simply lie about it afterward." Nora moved subtly closer to Lila. Adrian noticed. "Ah," he said, "the nurse instinct. Save everyone, even when no one saved you. My mother is alive." "Yes." "Where?" He studied her with cold pleasure. "Would you like to see her?" Nora stopped. Adrian reached into his jacket and withdrew a phone. On the screen was a live video. A woman sat in a white room, older, thin, dark hair streaked with gray, eyes like Nora's. Nora stopped breathing. The woman lifted her head, as if hearing something. Then she whispered, "Nora?" The world shattered. Nora reached for the phone. Adrian pulled it back. "Come with me," he said, "and I let the child live. Refuse, and Damian finds another daughter dead at an altar." Lila sobbed. "No." Nora looked at her, then at the phone. Her mother's face filled the screen, fragile and impossible. This was the kind of choice that destroyed people. The kind Damian had been making for her without permission. Now it was hers. Nora slowly raised her hands. "Untie Lila first." Adrian smiled. "You negotiate like your father. I learned from emergency rooms. Nothing moves until the airway is secure." He laughed softly. Then a gun clicked in the shadows behind him. Damian's voice filled the chapel. She said, "Untie my daughter." Adrian did not turn. "Damian," he said, still arriving just late enough to suffer. Damian stepped from a side passage, gun trained on Adrian's head. Smoke stained his shirt. Blood marked his temple. He looked like hell had tried to stop him, and failed. Lila cried, "Daddy!" Damian's eyes flicked to her. "Look at Nora, little star, not him." Adrian sighed. Touching. Nora edged closer to Lila. Adrian raised the phone higher. "Shoot me, and Elena Belandi dies." Damian's aim did not waver, but Nora saw the calculation, the agony. Adrian smiled wider. "There he is, the locked door, still pretending he doesn't bleed." Nora looked at Damian. For all his power, all his men, all his cold control, Adrian had trapped him with the one weapon he feared most. Choice. Damian could save Lila, or Nora's mother, or Nora, but not all at once. Nora understood then why he had become what he was, not because he loved violence, because violence was the only language men like Adrian respected. But she also understood something Damian had forgotten. Healing was not softness. It was strategy. Nora lunged for the altar candles and threw them into the old velvet drape beside Adrian. Fire climbed instantly. Adrian turned. Damian fired not at Adrian, but at the chain holding the chapel chandelier. The iron fixture crashed down between Adrian and Lila. Nora Dove grabbed Lila and rolled behind the altar as bullets cracked through smoke and flame. Damian crossed the chapel like a storm. Adrian ran toward the side tunnel. Damian followed. Nora untied Lila with shaking hands. "You're okay," she whispered. "You're okay." Lila clung to her. "Daddy." A shout echoed from the tunnel. Then a gunshot. Then silence. Nora's heart stopped. She pushed Lila toward Mateo, who had just stormed in with 2 guards. "Take her." Lila screamed, "No." Nora ran into the tunnel. It was narrow, stone-walled, lit by emergency bulbs and firelight from behind. At the far end, Damian was on one knee, one hand pressed to his side. Blood spread between his fingers. Adrian stood several feet away, gun trained on him. Nora froze. Adrian glanced at her. Predictable. Damian's eyes lifted. "Run." Nora did not. She stepped forward. Adrian smiled. "Both of you, then." Nora looked at Damian, and something passed between them. Not a plan, not words. Something older. Trust before permission. She threw herself sideways into a metal pipe along the wall. Steam exploded from an old valve, blasting across Adrian's face. Damian moved. Even wounded, he was terrifying. He slammed Adrian into the wall, the gun skittering away. They struggled in the steam and smoke, two shadows made of old betrayal. Adrian drove a knife into Damian's shoulder. Damian grunted but did not let go. Nora grabbed the fallen gun. Her hands shook violently. Adrian saw and laughed through blood. "Can you do it, nurse? Can you take a life?" Damian looked at her, breathing hard. "Don't," he said. Not because Adrian deserved mercy. Because Damian did not want her carrying that darkness. Adrian lunged. Nora fired. The shot hit the pipe above him, showering sparks and steam. Adrian flinched long enough for Damian to strike him hard across the jaw. Adrian collapsed against the stone, unconscious. Nora lowered the gun, shaking. Damian stared at her. "You missed on purpose," he said. "I'm a nurse," she whispered, "not an executioner." He sank harder to one knee. Nora rushed to him. Blood pulsed from the wound in his side, dark against his shirt. "No," she breathed. "No, no, no." Damian tried to smile. Failed. "Bossy, even in tunnels." "Shut up." She pressed both hands to the wound. "Matteo." Footsteps thundered behind her. Damian's hand closed weakly around her wrist. "Nora, don't talk." "If I don't?" "I said don't talk." His eyes held hers. For the first time since she met him, Damian Russo looked afraid. Not of death. Of leaving her with questions. "Raven House," he rasped. "West Bank. Beneath the old orphanage. Matteo knows." Nora pressed harder, tears burning her eyes. "You're going to tell me yourself." "I'm sorry." The words were so quiet she almost missed them. "For what?" she whispered. "All of it." His eyes fluttered. Nora slapped his face lightly. "Damian, stay with me." His mouth curved faintly. "There she is," he whispered. "My princess." This time, Nora did not tell him to stop. Damian survived because Nora refused to let him die. She rode in the ambulance with him back to Street Mercy, one hand buried in gauze against his wound, the other gripping his blood-slick fingers. He lost consciousness twice. Both times she brought him back with his name in a voice that did not sound like hers. "Damian Russo, if you die after making my life this complicated, I will personally drag you out of hell and kill you again." One of the paramedics stared. Damian, pale and barely conscious, whispered, "Romantic." Nora almost sobbed. At the hospital, the same ER that had been shattered hours earlier opened for him like a battlefield, welcoming back its most dangerous soldier. Dr. Kellerman had been taken into custody. The sniper was dead. Adrian Vale was locked in the Russo estate basement under guard until federal agents could be forced, bribed, or threatened into taking him without losing him. Nora did not ask which. She scrubbed into Damian's surgery despite Dr. Kellerman's replacement, arguing that she was too emotionally involved. "I'm always emotionally involved," she snapped. "That's why my patients live." Damian's surgery lasted 3 hours. During the second hour, Alessandra Russo woke upstairs. During the third, Lila fell asleep in Matteo's lap outside the OR, with Nora's spare scrub jacket around her shoulders. At 5:46 a.m., Damian's bleeding was controlled. At 6:12 he was stable. At 6:30 Nora walked into the staff bathroom, locked the door, and finally broke. She cried for Miriam, for the mother in the white room, for the father she never knew, for the little girl in one pink shoe, for the dangerous man who had built cages because nobody taught him how to build doors. When she came out, Alessandra Russo was waiting in a wheelchair. She looked bruised, fragile, and regal as a broken queen. Her dark eyes filled when she saw Nora. For a long moment neither spoke. Then Alessandra reached into the pocket of her robe and withdrew a photograph. 2 children stood beneath a magnolia tree. A dark-haired teenage boy in a black suit, trying very hard not to smile. A little girl in a white dress and silver shoes, holding his hand with absolute trust. Nora took the photo with trembling fingers. "You called him Dami," Alessandra said softly. "He pretended to hate it." Nora touched the little girl's face. Her own face. "I don't remember." "You remembered enough to become someone who runs toward fear." Alessandra's eyes shone. "Your mother would be proud." Nora's throat tightened. "You know where she is." Alessandra nodded. "Why didn't you save her?" The question was cruel. Nora knew it. Alessandra accepted it as deserved. "Because Adrian made her disappear better than we could find her. Because every time we got close he moved her. Because I chose to keep you hidden rather than risk losing you both. Her voice broke. Because I was a coward in the shape of a strategist. Nora looked away. Alessandra reached for her hand, then stopped, giving her the choice Damian never had. Nora let her take it. We can get her back, Alessandra whispered. But we need you. Damian woke to Nora sitting beside his bed. The ICU was quiet, washed in pale morning light. Rain had finally stopped. The city beyond the windows looked bruised and clean. His eyes opened slowly. Nora watched him orient himself the monitors, the IV, the bandages, the pain. Then here. Relief moved through him before he could hide it. You stayed, he said, voice rough. I'm your nurse. No. His eyes held hers. You stayed. Nora should have argued. She did not. Lila had drawn a picture and taped it to his IV pole. 3 stick figures holding hands beneath a giant black SUV in a rainbow. Damian looked at it for a long time. She's okay, Nora said. Scared, but okay. My mother? Alive, already manipulating nurses. His mouth twitched. Nora leaned forward. My mother is alive. Damian closed his eyes. When he opened them, he did not lie. Yes, I'm going to get her. I know. You're not going to lock me away. No. The answer surprised her. He looked toward the window. I am tired, Nora. It was the most human thing he had said. Tired of what? Loving people like war is the only way to keep them. Her breath caught. He turned back to her. I don't know how to do this without control, but I will learn if you let me stand beside you. Nora's eyes burned. Damian, I don't deserve forgiveness. No, she said softly, you don't. He nodded once, accepting the wound. But you may earn trust. His eyes lifted. The hope there was small, dangerous, devastating. Nora stood before it could undo her and checked his IV. Rest. We go after my mother when you can walk without bleeding through expensive sheets. I can walk now. You passed out yesterday. Temporarily. You were stabbed. Minor inconvenience. She gave him a look. He settled back against the pillow. Yes, Nurse Vale. Belandi, she said. Damian went still. Nora touched the locket at her throat. My name is Nora Belandi Vale. I get to keep both. His expression softened in a way that made him look younger and more haunted than ever. Yes, he said quietly. You do. Raven House stood on the west bank beneath a dead orphanage, swallowed by vines and river fog. They went at night. Not with an army. With precision. Federal agents had been notified through channels Nora did not understand. Damian's men surrounded the grounds. Alessandra, still recovering, coordinated from the Russo estate. Lila stayed with the housekeeper and 3 guards, after making Damian promise on all his scary suits that he would bring Nora's mommy home. Nora wore a bulletproof vest over black clothes and carried a medical bag. Damian hated every inch of her being there. But he did not stop her. That mattered. The orphanage smelled of mildew, dust, and secrets. Moonlight spilled through broken windows. Old children's murals peeled from the walls, sunflowers, birds, smiling clouds made grotesque by decay. They found the entrance beneath a collapsed chapel floor. Nora's hands were steady until they reached the white corridor from her dreams. Then she stopped. Damian was beside her instantly, not touching, waiting. I know this place, she whispered. You were here once, he said, before the crash. Your parents came searching for proof Adrian was trafficking children through fake adoption records. That's why he killed your father. Nora closed her eyes. Pieces moved inside her. Her mother's voice singing. Her father's hand lifting her into a car. Rain. Screaming. Fire. Damian's hand hovered near hers. This time, Nora reached first. His fingers closed around hers with careful strength. They moved forward. The guards at Raven House were not prepared for Damian Russo with patience. He did not rage. He did not shout. He dismantled the operation with cold efficiency, room by room, lock by lock. Nora found 3 women in the lower medical wing, sedated but alive. Then 2 men who had been used as leverage in old family wars. Then a room full of files documenting names, payments, adoptions, betrayals. Finally, at the end of the corridor, behind a steel door coated with Adrian's ring, they found Elena Belandi. She sat by the window exactly as she had in the video. Older than Nora's last memory, thinner. But when she turned, her eyes were Nora's eyes. For a moment neither moved. Then Elena stood, one hand pressed to her mouth. "My baby," she whispered. Nora broke. She crossed the room and fell into her mother's arms. Elena held her with a sound that was part sob, part prayer, part resurrection. Nora clung to her like a child and a woman at once, grieving every stolen birthday, every unanswered question, every night she had believed herself orphaned, while her mother breathed somewhere in a cage. Damian stood at the doorway, silent. Elena looked over Nora's shoulder. Her face changed when she saw him. "Damian." His jaw tightened. "Mrs. Belandi. You found her?" "No," he said. "She found us." Elena looked down at her daughter. "That sounds like her." Nora laughed through tears. The extraction should have been clean. It almost was. Then Adrian's final insurance policy triggered. A fire alarm shrieked through Raven House. Not water sprinklers. Gus. Damian smelled it first. "Out," he ordered. "Now." They moved fast, Elena weak between Nora and Matteo. Smoke began pouring from vents. Somewhere above, explosives thudded through the old structure. Adrian had planned to burn Raven House with every secret inside, just as he had burned Nora's childhood. They reached the chapel floor as the ceiling cracked. A beam collapsed, separating Nora and Elena from Damian. Flames roared up between them. "Nora!" Damian shouted. The heat punched the air from her lungs. Elena coughed violently. Matteo tried to lift debris from the other side, but fire spread fast, climbing the old wood. Damian looked at the flames. Nora knew that look. He was about to cross. He would burn alive before he watched her die behind fire a second time. "No!" she screamed. "Damian, don't!" He did not listen. Of course he did not. He wrapped his coat around his arm and came through the flames. By the time he reached her, one sleeve was burning. Nora beat it out with her hands, sobbing curses at him. "You idiot." Later he coughed. Together they lifted Elena through a gap beneath the beam. Matteo dragged her clear. The ceiling groaned. Nora started through next. The floor collapsed under her. Damian caught her wrist. For one suspended second, she dangled over a burning lower room, smoke spiraling up around her, Damian gripping her with both hands while pain tore across his still healing wounds. His stitches ripped. Blood spread beneath his vest. "Nora," he ground out. "Don't let go," she gasped. His eyes locked on hers. The same words from 15 years ago. The same fire. The same boy, now a man, refusing to release her. "Never," Damian said. Matteo and another guard grabbed Damian's shoulders, pulling while Damian pulled Nora up inch by inch. His face twisted with pain, but his grip never loosened. Nora slammed onto the floor beside him. He covered her body with his as the ceiling caved behind them. They crawled through smoke toward the exit, Elena ahead of them, Matteo shouting directions, flames consuming Raven House and every ghost Adrian had left behind. Outside, dawn broke over the river. Real dawn this time. Not hospital fluorescence. Not emergency lights. Gold light cutting through smoke and fog. Nora collapsed on the wet grass with her mother in her arms, and Damian beside them, bleeding again, coughing ash, alive. Federal sirens wailed in the distance. Raven House burned behind them. Nora looked at it and felt something inside her finally stop running. Weeks later, New Orleans knew only pieces of the story. A criminal network exposed. A corrupt doctor arrested. A presumed dead crime figure, Adrian Vale, taken into federal custody after trying to flee under an alias. A suspicious fire at an abandoned orphanage. The Russo name appeared in no official statements. Of course it didn't. Men like Damian knew how to vanish from paper. But inside Street Mercy Hospital, people talked. They talked about the night masked men stormed the ER and a nurse fought them with trauma shears. They talked about the little girl with one pink shoe. They talked about black SUVs in the rain and a mafia boss who carried his daughter like she was the last innocent thing in the world. Nora returned to work after 3 weeks. Not because everything was healed. Because healing was not the absence of scars. It was choosing what to do with them. Her mother moved into a quiet house near the Russo estate, but not inside it. Nora visited every morning before shifts. Elena Belandi was fragile, but not broken. Some days she remembered everything. Some days trauma stole pieces back. Nora learned not to demand what pain was not ready to give. Lila visited the hospital pediatric wing every Friday with drawings for the nurses. She wore 2 shoes now, usually mismatched by choice, and called Nora Princess Nurse. until Nora threatened to check her ears with the cold otoscope. Damian hated hospitals, but he came anyway. At first, he stayed in the parking lot, leaning against a black SUV beneath streetlights, pretending he was there for security. Then he started walking Nora inside after night shifts. Then he started bringing coffee exactly how she liked it, though she never told him her order. She scolded him for that. He did not apologize. He simply brought tea the next time and said, "An experiment." Their relationship did not become simple. Nothing about them could. There were arguments. About guards. About secrets. About Damian's instinct to solve fear with surveillance, and Nora's instinct to tear down every wall he built without consent. Once, after she found a Russo guard posted outside her apartment without asking, she drove to Damian's office at midnight, stormed past 3 terrified men, and threw the guard's earpiece onto his desk. "No cages," she said. Damian looked up from a stack of documents, expression calm. Then he dismissed everyone. When they were alone, he said, "There are still threats. There will always be threats. I can't lose you. You don't get to keep me by treating me like something already lost." That landed. He stood, came around the desk, and stopped an arm's length away. "I don't know how to be halfway afraid," he admitted. Nora's anger softened despite herself. "I'm not asking you to stop being afraid. I'm asking you to stop making fear my prison." He nodded slowly. The next day the guard was gone. The week after, Damian asked before assigning security for a public charity event. Nora said yes. Not because he demanded. Because he asked. That was how trust began, not in grand speeches. In smaller violences, refused. In control, surrendered by inches. In a dangerous man learning that love was not possession, and a wounded woman learning that accepting protection did not make her weak. 1 month after Raven House burned, Damian took Nora to the magnolia tree from the old photograph. It stood in the Russo garden, older now, its branches twisting wide over a stone path. Lila ran ahead chasing fireflies in the blue dusk, while Elena and Alessandra sat on the terrace, 2 surviving mothers wrapped in blankets, speaking softly like women comparing the cost of miracles. Damian stood beside Nora beneath the tree. For once he wore no suit jacket, just a black shirt with the sleeves rolled to his forearms. The scar at his side was still healing. So was the one Nora could not see. He handed her a small velvet box. Nora narrowed her eyes. "If that's a ring, I'm throwing it into the fountain." His mouth curved. "Noted. It better be noted. It's not a ring." She opened it. Inside was the missing half of her locket. A tiny silver frame, smoke-damaged but restored. Inside was a photo of 2 children beneath a magnolia tree. Damian Princess. Nora's throat tightened. "I found it in my mother's safe," he said. "She kept it after the crash. I think she believed one day you would come home." Nora touched the photo. "I don't know where home is anymore," she whispered. Damian looked at Lila laughing across the grass, at Elena on the terrace, at the house glowing behind them, then back at Nora. "Then don't choose yet." She looked up. His voice was low, careful. "Choose tomorrow, and the day after. And if one day it isn't here, I will still make sure the road is clear." Nora studied him. The feared Damian Russo. The locked door. The boy in the rain. The man who had lied, protected, controlled, bled, learned, and come back through fire twice because he did not know how to let her burn. "You make that sound easy," she said. "It will probably kill me." She laughed softly. He looked at her like the sound was worth more than his empire. Lila ran up then, breathless, holding something cupped in her hands. "I caught a firefly." Nora crouched. "Careful, don't hurt it." "I won't." Lila opened her hands just enough for the tiny light to glow between her palms. "Daddy says some things only shine when they're not trapped." Nora looked up at Damian. He looked mildly betrayed by his daughter's timing. "Did he?" Lila nodded seriously. "He said that when he let my butterfly go and looked sad." Nora stood slowly. Damian slipped his hands into his pockets, suddenly fascinated by the garden. Nora smiled. Not fully, but enough. Later, after Lila released the firefly and Elena went inside to rest, Nora and Damian remained beneath the magnolia tree as night settled over New Orleans. The city hummed beyond the gates. Danger still existed. Men like Adrian Vale did not vanish without leaving echoes. The Russo Empire still had enemies. Nora's recovered name would ripple through old alliances and older grudges. Nothing about their future promised peace. But for the first time, Nora did not feel like a ghost inside someone else's story. She felt alive. Damian reached for her hand, then stopped halfway. Still asking. Always asking now. Nora looked at his hand, then placed hers in it. His fingers closed around hers, with the same careful strength from the tunnel, from the fire, from a childhood she was finally brave enough to remember. "Don't call me princess in public," she said. His eyes warmed in the darkness. "No. Or at work. No. Or when you're trying to win an argument. That seems restrictive. Damian." His thumb brushed once over her knuckles. "Yes, Nora." She leaned into him, just enough for their shoulders to touch. After a moment he lowered his forehead to hers. "No kiss yet." No dramatic claim. Just breath shared beneath magnolia leaves, with fireflies glowing around them like pieces of a life returned. And when he finally whispered the name again, it was not a command, not a claim, not a ghost from the past. It was a promise made softer by everything they had survived. "Princess." Nora closed her eyes. "This time," she answered. "Dami."